Hi there. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon here at the Family Cafe. This is the Diagnosis What Now presentation by Collaborative Corner for Exceptional Children, and we're so glad to have you. My name is Amy Nielsen, and in addition to what you can read about me on the screen, I'm first and foremost a mother of 4 amazing children, one of them that gave you the brochure today. Olivia, say hi. I also have 3 other children. The older 3 are adults, and the youngest little guy is named Barkley, and he has, excuse me, autism, ADHD, and an intellectual disability, so I understand firsthand what it's like. In addition to working with Collaborative Corner, I also run the Big Abilities blog and podcast, and we're going to throw a lot at you today, but every family's journey is different, and hopefully you're going to learn some things that will help you in your family's journey.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Dr. Karen Hans, and I am the Chief Clinical Officer for Collaborative Corner. When I started with Collaborative Corner, I am a behavior analyst by trade. I've been in the field for 2 decades now, and I was just a panelist where I would answer questions when people emailed in for info about ABA or just basic behavior questions, because that's what we kind of do at Collaborative Corner. Our whole mission is to give out actual factual information to families. So we have a panel of medical providers and specialists where you can go to ask a question for free and receive a response within 24 hours. And as we've kind of grown, we've started to grow as an organization, and our whole goal now is, as we're growing, to be able to take your child in and have them from diagnosis through treatment. So we're slowly adding service by service, and as we've done that, I've kind of grown into this new role. So currently we have a clinic in West Orange County, and we are offering speech, feeding therapy, psychological diagnosis, as well as applied behavior analysis. And a little bit more about me and my background is, I mentioned I was a behavior analyst by trade. That's still what I do day to day, and I love it. I've worked in school settings, in home, in clinics, communities, as well as internationally. So I kind of have a good picture of what's gone on in the disabilities world. And I'm a mother as well myself, so definitely understand that parenting journey. We have some of other members of our panel today here with us who we'll introduce at the end, and we also have a booth. You guys can stop by and ask us questions. I'm going to turn it back over to Amy now.
Thank you. So our presentation outline is kind of in 2 parts. The first part, the topics we're going to touch upon are going to be early intervention through education. And then the second 3 topics are going to be things such as medical providers, nonprofit and funding sources, and then building a support system. So first, early intervention. So early intervention is that early diagnosis, or that early phase of your child's life, like birth to age 3. And here in the state of Florida, our early intervention program is called Early Steps. And actually, they have a session here today at 4. So if you want more information about Early Steps, you can visit that session today. So what are you looking for in that early phase of your child's life to know if they need any sort of services? Well, there's a really good resource. I think it's on your handout. It is the CDC's Milestone Tracker app, and that's a really good free resource that you can put on your phone and track your child's developmental milestones. And then if it's just yes or no questions based on your child's age, and then if anything comes up significant, the app will kind of alert you, like, this might be something you want to have a provider check out. And at that point, you could contact Early Steps, and they do free evaluations, and then if your child is eligible for any services, those services will happen for free, either in your home or in the community. So those services are in a natural setting to children. Now, Dr. Hans is going to share with you how private providers can help you during that early intervention phase.
So kind of the aim of this presentation was, we know as we've kind of been on this journey, is once you get there as a parent and you're given that diagnosis, you're also not only given that diagnosis in an appointment, but you're also given about 17 front and back leaflets of all of the services that you need to access immediately and get on some form of wait list. It's a lot to wade through, and it's very overwhelming as a parent. So we're going to try to just kind of help you navigate that process. So for us, like Amy said, in the early intervention, it's that kind of 3 and younger. So when your child's diagnosed that early, there's absolutely the free resource of Early Steps, but often if you have a diagnosis, you might also be given scripts for things like speech therapy or applied behavior analysis or occupational therapy or feeding therapy. So you might be given a script for a different medical-based intervention. And with that, typically here in Orlando anyway, where we're based, they typically give you kind of a front and back page, and it's like, 27 companies that you can contact and see. One of the things that I always recommend to parents is to call a couple different companies, because every provider is going to have a different philosophy and a different stance of where they come from. So you need to find the right fit for your family. As well as when you're given all of these, it can be very overwhelming, and you don't want therapy or different medical-based interventions to take over your life. So you have to kind of think about, what's the priority need for my family? What is it that I'm questioning the most right now? So if I have a little one and my biggest concern might be communication, they may have given me a referral for occupational therapy, ABA, and speech, but right now I'm just really concerned about communication. I might just go straight for speech at this point in time. Just because you have a referral, don't be overwhelmed and don't feel like you have to do all of the things at once. One thing I want to point out. So after you've kind of calling around and you've gotten those provision of services, and again, these are usually medically based services, this is where you will get to learn something else on your parenting journey if you're parenting a child of special needs. You typically have to become best friends and an insurance expert, unfortunately. You're going to get in close contact with your insurance provider, and you're going to have to learn terms like out-of-pocket maximum for your family, because all of these medical-based services are very pricey and they're very cumbersome on a family. So there's usually a limit that once your family hits it, they no longer have to pay throughout the year. But it's something that you want to know going in, because this is a significant impact on your family's quality of life, and what is good for your family. So you have to kind of find out with your insurance provider what's going to be the best for you. What do they cover? Is it a pay every visit? Is it just I have to pay this much for this service? Do I get so many visits? What does that look like? And unfortunately, it's not an easy or fun process, but it's one I definitely recommend looking at, because after we've gotten a diagnosis, we're kind of thinking, okay, my parenting journey is going to look a little bit different than what I thought it was going to look like. Okay, I've decided I need maybe some speech therapy for my child, and I'm going to go and do that. And now I've got to figure out, what does that look like in terms of cost and time for my family, and how do I fit that in? Because you might have other children who have needs, or you need to work, or how am I going to get my kid there and back? So just lots of factors that go into all of these things. I'm going to turn it back over to Amy for preschool.
Okay, so once your child hits about the age of 3, if they've been in early steps, they're going to be aging out. And the transition from early steps into ESC preschool is pretty seamless if your child's already in that space. If your child hasn't gone through early intervention, then you're going to want to contact your district's ESC program. Just go to your school district's website and search for their ESC program, and then give them a call. And sometimes parents aren't sure if they want to go the ESC pre-K route. Those programs can look different school to school. Some of them may be half-day programs. Some of them may be 2 days a week, 3 days a week. And parents may think, well, I've got my child with a full-time babysitter because I work, or they're in a great preschool that I want to keep them at. But I still recommend parents go through that process, because you're going to get another set of evaluations. It's just going to tell you more about your child. And after you go through those evaluations, with my own son, what happened was he was assigned to a preschool, an ESC preschool, a local school, with a great teacher. It was a great program, and I was all set to have him enrolled at the beginning of the school year. And once the beginning of the school year came, I was like, I just didn't feel like he was ready yet. So I wanted to keep him in his ABA for the rest of that school year and have him start the next year, and so that's what we did. But I was glad that I went through that process, because I had those evaluations, and then I could determine whether or not I thought he was ready. He went the following year, and it turned out great. So you do want to contact them, go through that process, and there are other options, as in my case, we passed on it the first year, and we went the second year. So I'm going to pass it back over to Dr. Hans, and she's going to talk to you more about other preschool options for those 3 to 5-year-olds.
Thanks, Amy. And I do want to echo what Amy said. I think it's a great idea to go ahead and take advantage of what the school district offers you in terms of evaluations, because even if you're undecided if you want to enter into that preschool program, it just gives you more information about how your child learns, and that can just help you understand your child a little bit better, because they will look at things, how is their nonverbal communication, how is their verbal communication, how is their motor planning, different things like that, and it just gives you another point of reference to maybe understand your child a little bit better. So with our preschool options that are outside of our publicly funded kind of ESC pre-K programs, we have a lot of privatized preschools. So sometimes there are preschools that are dedicated to certain types of children with different special needs. We have preschools that are based in different therapy models, so there may be an ABA-based preschool, as well as Amy kind of mentioned, we have a lot of just private preschools who are really ESC friendly and do a great job of supporting our children in that environment. Additionally, all of those medical services that were available for your child in that early intervention, if we're now that 3 and above, and we're looking at these preschool years, they're still available at this age. They don't really go away if they're medically necessary. When they're determined by your doctor to be medically necessary, they're just there and available for you. So you can still receive your speech, your occupational therapy, your feeding therapy, mental health counseling, ABA, and that's kind of some of the stuff that you have to, again, look at what works best for your child. So when we work with parents, we primarily specialize in early intervention. That's kind of where our passion is, and I always say I get paid to play. I would much rather do that all day than, do something that looks more like work, so it's more fun. But when I talk to parents about what's right for your child, that's only something they can determine. But when we look at what's the best setting and where your child's their needs are being met the most, we kind of look at what level of support can they provide. Because typically in an ESC pre-K classroom, it's not one-to-one support. It's usually like a 1-to-3, 1-to-4 type ratio where there's 3 or 4 kids to 1 teacher. So is your child going to be okay in that level of support? Are they going to gain skills in that level of support? Do they have the skills to be in there? And if not, then we look at maybe a more intensive service, and that's where you look at maybe a private preschool that provides a higher level of support, or sticking with something like ABA therapy where they provide that one-to-one support. At Collaborative Corner, we've kind of come up with a social skills group for this type age population for our kids who have yet to enter kindergarten. We affectionately call it play school because our whole goal is just to be able to provide an environment for the kids in West Orange County where they can come where they're not able to be supported in that higher ratio setting. So our kids are in a 1-to-1 setting or a 1-to-2 setting. So we have 1 adult to 1 kid or 1 adult to 2 kids. So we can provide a higher level of support than other people can. And we're just doing things that look like would happen at a normal preschool, but we're working on their individual goals and their individual treatment plans, which we're just able to provide the resources that other places can't. And I'm going to keep saying this over and over, but as the parent, you're the expert on your child. You know what's best for your child. No provider will be able to tell you that. That is something that we firmly believe. And it just helps if you think about, what does my child need? Where do I think they're going to be the most successful? What skill level do they have? And how is that going to happen? I'm going to turn it back over to Amy.
The program that Dr. Hans is describing, the play school, was the exact type of program that my son did 1 more year before he went into the ESC preschool setting. It was fantastic. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. So now that our children have gone through that 3 to 5 year range, it's time for kindergarten. It's exciting and nervous at the same time. So we're transitioning into school, and again, you're going to have a lot of options, and you'll be building and creating a plan that works for your family. So if they've been in that ESC preschool setting, then the transition into kindergarten is pretty seamless again. It will involve more evaluations, which again will give you more information about your child. And the teams, if they haven't been in ESC preschool, you're going to want to contact the staffing specialist or the guidance counselor at the school in your area, and to kind of get that ball rolling, get those evaluations done. And your child will be receiving what's called an IEP. This is an individualized education plan, and that will be full of services and accommodations for the needs that your child has. If you are curious about more information about IEPs, there is another session here today called 5 Steps to Getting a Crystal Clear IEP, and that's in Orlando Ballroom M. That's Saturday. Don't have the time written down on that one. But you can also contact a special education advocate. So we have an advocate at Collaborative Corner, Jessica Barisano. She's here right now. And actually, that's how I ended up joining Collaborative Corner as a volunteer, because I needed special education advocacy for my son, and Collaborative Corner was where I went. And and something to be noted is if you choose to not send your child to the public school for kindergarten, but you've gone through and gotten the IEP and you decide to go to a private or a charter, you should remember that they aren't obligated to provide all the services on that IEP. Some might. My son is going to be going to an autism charter school in the fall, and actually they kind of take the IEP and going a little bit above that. So you just want to make sure that you realize, and if you're homeschooling, the district isn't obligated to provide those services. So if your child was going to be receiving speech therapy or occupational therapy in the public school setting, and you choose to homeschool them, then they're not obligated to provide those services. So that's just something to remember. And now I am going to pass the mic back to Dr. Hans to talk about how those private providers can continue to support you through school.
Absolutely. Something I kind of want to add on to what Amy said is it's definitely helpful. That kindergarten transition is a huge milestone for any parent. You know, I'm like, you're in real school now, even if you've been in preschool. It didn't really count. It's voluntary. You didn't have to be there. Now you have to show up to school. You're in kindergarten. So it's always a little bit nerve-wracking for every parent, for sure. Within the school, I think it's very overwhelming because if you're not within the field of disabilities or special needs, you may not even know what your school district is obligated to offer you. The biggest difference that I kind of want to explain to you guys is the difference between medically based services and school-based services. So your outside providers, those medical-based services you've been receiving in preschool, they are medically necessary. For the school district to provide those services, they have to be educationally relevant, meaning that they're impacting somehow your child's education or lack of receiving that education for them to receive it. So if you're receiving language therapy outside of school, they may not deem it educationally relevant at that point in time when they come in and do their school evaluation. So there is something, a little bit of difference there. It doesn't always have to look exactly the same. I think that's an important point to kind of add on. And then all across the state of Florida, we have different rules, and even within the same county, it's school-based management here in Florida. So you have different rules of what your providers are allowed to do and not do within each school, and you kind of have to contact your local school to find that out. So if you are still receiving those medically based services, you've just been given a diagnosis, or you've just now needed to reach out for maybe additional support services, in Orange County specifically, your private provider can become a vendor for the county, but it's up to the school to let you know if and you're allowed on campus, where you can see the child on campus and how much access you'll have to them. They are happy to, sorry, I don't know why that cut out. Some schools are happy to have you support anywhere, everywhere, whatever time that you feel like is necessary. Other schools may limit your time and limit your access to the child because they're looking at their education. That's their priority need. That's where they want them to be. So it's just a little bit different. The other thing that's worthy of noting is the fact that if your child is receiving medically necessary services, it's just like a doctor's appointment. So you can check your child out of school early or reduce their learning day if that's what's needed and that's what's going to make your child the most successful. So it's just something to keep in mind. And I just want to kind of put it from the provider perspective, from our perspective, we always look at, just like the school does, what's the least restrictive environment, another term you'll become very familiar with as your child enters school. For us, like, our whole goal is to get your kid in school and in after-school soccer or swimming or whatever it is that they like to do, because that's where all kids are. That's their least restrictive environment. They don't go to work every day. They go to school. That's what kids do. So we want them to be there. We want them to be with their neurotypical peers. We want them to be doing just everything as everybody else. So that should be kind of the end game in mind, is what we're looking at. And that's what we're all trying to do, is get your kid to where they're the most successful and the most supported they can be. And it looks different for every child. Just because I have the same diagnosis as someone else, it doesn't necessarily mean that we need the same service, the same level of service, the same medical interventions, the same IEP. It doesn't. It's very individualized.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit. We've kind of gone through the birth, we've got them in kindergarten, and there are a couple other topics that we wanted to mention that we feel are really valuable for parents in that early diagnosis phase, and one of them is medical providers. And I wanted to touch upon developmental pediatricians because this was a medical provider that I didn't even know existed until I had a child with autism. And a developmental pediatrician, your pediatricians who you see when your child's sick or for immunizations and things like that. But if you have a child with a developmental disability, you may not know, or you may already know about developmental pediatricians, but they're an excellent person to add to your child's team. And a developmental pediatrician is going to be they're experts in children's developmental milestones, and they also can diagnose things such as ADHD, autism spectrum disorder. They can prescribe medications. My son sees his developmental pediatrician every 3 months, and he has for 3.5 years. And so it's an excellent way just to build that really personal rapport with that medical provider, and they intimately know your child and your family. They have offered so many different things for our family. We've traveled and run out of medication. They've called in prescriptions. I mean, it's just been great. So I really recommend, if you don't have a developmental pediatrician, ask your pediatrician to refer you to one, and go ahead and get that person added to your child's professional support system. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Hans to talk about the other medical providers.
So just like Amy said, when you've kind of opened up this new door and a different parenting journey than you thought you were going to be on, now we have a whole myriad of specialists and doctors you had no idea even existed, or that was even a profession a lot of times, like a developmental pediatrician. The other kind of pediatrician that we run into quite a lot is called a complex care pediatrician. And typically kids that see this type of pediatrician have either multiple diagnoses and often a chronic health condition or an underlying genetic condition. And the reason this is really important is because when you have all of those different factors and you're going to different specialists and receiving different medical interventions, you do want some coordinated care and someone overseeing all of that. Because as much as, everything is technological, and even if you're within the same hospital network and everybody's supposed to talk to everybody, it doesn't always happen. And so it's nice when you have one person that's kind of overseeing your care and making sure that you're not receiving interactions with different medical processes, giving you time between them, or whatever is needed for that. Additionally, other specialists that we often interact with a lot are gastroenterologists, because their incidence of kiddos having gut issues that typically have a disability, as well as doctors. I don't know what I'm doing to make this cut out, I apologize. And then, I don't know where I was going now, but I think it's really good to have someone who's coordinating your care and looking at that, because what you don't want to have happen is just you're being told one thing from one provider, one thing from another provider, and a third thing from another provider, and you and the parent are left trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do? What's most important right now? And is it okay to do all of these things together? So definitely start looking for someone who can coordinate your care and help you to decide what's the most priority need. Again, you're the expert on your child. You're going to know what's most impactful for your family. But when you have 2 or 3 things lined up, you kind of have to decide what's first, what's best, and can we do anything in combination to cut down on stress for us and our kiddos.
Now, the other topic that we thought was really important to share with you today is the support that you can receive from nonprofit organizations. And prior to my son being diagnosed with all of his diagnoses, I didn't realize the support that families like mine could receive from nonprofits like Collaborative Corner for Exceptional Children. So there's some that I want to share with you today. And, the services that you can receive from a nonprofit typically are at little to no charge, and you have people that are just really passionate about helping families like yours and like mine. So there's a couple of databases that I recommend families use that are really good places to find nonprofit organizations. One is Bright Feet, and you've probably seen their leaflet floating around your speech therapist's office. Their website is fantastic for really doing a really good search for not only nonprofits, but actual providers as well. The Florida Navigator is a great resource as well. That actually is done by the Association for Persons with Disabilities, and they have a session called Search for Resources Saturday at 5:30 back in this ballroom. And actually, I found out about the Florida Navigator here at the Family Cafe a couple of years ago. So it's also a database you can search by your zip code for nonprofits and for other resources in your own community. So those are 2 great resources to use to find nonprofits. And then I wanted to list, besides Collaborative Corner, which is of course my favorite nonprofit, but 3 of my other favorites that I really try to share with families. One is the National Autism Association. One of their resources to me is invaluable and should be in the hands of every family that has a child with especially autism spectrum disorder or is prone to wandering or eloping. And they offer a resource actually called the Big Red Safety Box. It is free. They do request an $8 shipping if you can afford to pay that, but it's not required. And in that Big Red Safety Box are things like door alarms and stop signs and lots of information to share with first responders or teachers about the tendency of children with developmental disabilities to wander or elope from a safe place into maybe an unsafe place or an unsupervised place. So that's from the National Autism Association. Nathaniel's Hope is another wonderful nonprofit here in our community. It was created in honor of this family's child named Nathaniel who had exceptional needs, and they aim to create positive community experiences for families impacted by exceptional needs. And as a matter of fact, just last week or the week before, maybe some of you attended it, they did something called the Smile Safari. So it was where you had your family in your car and they tossed in water bottles and ice creams and you drove through this safari. And so my son absolutely loved it, and it was free of charge, because sometimes accessing community events for families like ours can be really challenging. So they create events that our families can be successful and enjoy. And another nonprofit is UCF Center for Autism and Related Disorders. If you haven't registered your child there, that's also a great resource. They provide referrals, parent trainings, and they also do some positive community experiences as well. We attended a trip to the zoo a couple of years ago with CARD. Again, it was free of charge, and everything was set up so children with disabilities would be successful for the day. So those are some great nonprofits and how you can find some nonprofits. And I'm going to pass it back over to Dr. Hans to give you more information about Collaborative Corner for Exceptional Children.
So I gave you a little bit in the beginning, but now I'll kind of tell you more about exactly what we do. We are a nonprofit organization, and our founder, Jessica Barisano, is in the audience. She has a child with a disability, and she has been on this parenting journey that we're kind of describing for you guys today and had to navigate all of these things. And what she found herself doing was trying to Google, join Facebook groups, ask questions, and if any of you have done that, you know the rabbit holes that you can end up in, and then you're thinking, is this real? Is this right? I don't know if any of this information makes sense. So she's like, why is there not a place that we can go and just get information? If I have a question for a speech therapist, why can't I just ask a speech therapist a question without having to go through a whole evaluation and a referral and everything else just to ask a question about what therapy looks like or what does this mean? So she created a panel, and we have a large panel of a lot of experts, so help me if I miss anyone. But there's mental health, feeding therapy, speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy, applied behavior analysis, psychology, educational advocacy. That's it? Okay, got them all. Intervention, yes. And we also have an exceptionalities teacher on the panel. So the whole goal is that you can email in a question to these people who are actually professionals within the industry. As Amy mentioned, most of us all have a personal connection to the disabilities communities as well. And we are very passionate about what we do, and our whole goal is just dissemination of accurate information. We want families to say, like, hey, I was referred for this, and I don't even know what this means. Can you help me? My therapist recommended this. What do you think? We're not always going to say, oh, we can, go against what your therapist said, but we might try to explain it a little bit more or just give you some other resources. The other thing that our panelists do is we try to help you find providers within your community, because we know parents, one, I'm a parent, I'm tired all the time. Parenting is hard, period, the end, whether you work or not. So it's tiring being a parent. You already have enough on your plate. You're trying to raise tiny humans, and you're trying to make them really successful in society. You're probably working because you've got to make sure that you have insurance to be able to afford all of the care for your child. And then on top of that, now you've been given 72 providers to call, and then every one of them may or may not call you back, and there's a long wait list, and we don't know what to do, and do they take our insurance, and what. I know, because I specifically do ABA, I get a lot of calls, I was referred for this, I don't even know what this is. So we're trying to take some of the guessing game out of that, and we will call around and try to help you find a provider within your community who has availability the soonest. We can't always say immediately because we can't control that, that takes your funding source and all of those things. So that's another resource that we offer, and that's all for free. Because again, at the end of the day, we're just passionate about kids getting services. Our whole goal, and all providers' goals, honestly, we just want to get them as independent as possible, and that's what I tell my families when they come in, and that's what we tell all of our families. Your child is perfect just the way we are. We're just trying to give them as many skills as we can so they can be as independent as they possibly can, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're going to try to help you find a provider. We now have grown a little bit more where we're offering services, and with that, we have a small clinic that we offer, and I kind of mentioned it in the beginning, where we're doing ABA, speech, feeding, psychological testing, ADOS testing within our center, and we have our little play school. So we're really excited about that, because our whole goal is to keep hiring on all of the disciplines that I mentioned of our volunteers. We would like to transition them fully over, where we can not only refer you in your community, but if there's not access in ours, we can actually take you and provide services for you, because in our community it's just the same. There's wait lists everywhere, unfortunately. So it's a really fantastic resource. We have a booth here, 213. Stop by and visit us, and we'll give you all the information that we can. I'm going to pass it back over to Amy, who's going to take us on a tour about our tribes.
Thank you, Dr. Hans. So as a family of a child with exceptional needs, I know firsthand that it costs more to raise a child with a disability. It just does, and that's over the lifetime of our child. So there are some funding resources that I'm going to share with you that can help. The first is a couple of scholarships for children with special needs to help you customize your child's education. So Step Up for Students is listed here. There's another one called AAA Scholarship Foundation, I believe. And both of those, at both of those websites, you can apply for special needs scholarships such as the Gardner or the McKay, both which help you customize your child's education. They are needs-based, not income-based. So my son is a Gardner recipient currently because I'm homeschooling him. So the Gardner is for students that are not enrolled in public school. And that scholarship has a lot of flexibility. You could use it to pay for ABA therapy. You can use it to pay for speech therapy. You can use it to purchase homeschool materials. So there are a lot of private providers that are direct pay from Gardner. So that scholarship really is a great benefit if you choose to not have your child enrolled in public school. And the McKay is more for you, for your child if they've been in a public school, but you don't feel like their needs are being met as well at public school as you'd like to see, and there's another school that you want to transfer them to or a private school, that scholarship gives you flexibility to move within schools. So for more information about Gardner and McKay, there are 2 sessions being done here at the Family Cafe tomorrow. One is called McKay Scholarship Program and Gardner Scholarship Program. That's Saturday. And Florida Ballroom C, I will be attending that one with you if you go. There has been some new legislative changes within those scholarships, so that's why I'm really excited to go attend and find out what those are. I think that one of them is allowing siblings to transfer with the child with the disabilities. I think one, they're removing some recommendations or requirements that you had to be in school for a year, so I'm really curious to see what those are. And then in that same ballroom at 1 is everything you need to know about the Gardner Scholarship. So those are both tomorrow. I also wanted to add, another resource is the Medicaid waiver we have listed up here. So the Medicaid waiver is a lifelong benefit, a financial benefit, as well as access to Medicaid to persons with disabilities. And a lot of people don't know about that because it is a very long wait list. It can take years once you fill out the application to get on the wait list. And the application process can be really challenging to complete. And if you don't complete the application correctly, chances are you're going to get rejected and you may not even know why. So we like to refer to a group, and I don't think this is on your handout, so you may want to write this down. It's called the Special Needs Guidance Group. And the girl who runs that company is Scarlett Kibbe. The address is www.snggroup.org. And at the Special Needs Guidance Group, you can either download directions and how to fill out the application correctly, or they will do it for you. So that's a great resource, great service, and especially if your family is really struggling financially, she can often help families get through that wait list a little bit quicker. So I really recommend, if you have a child with a diagnosed disability, to get in touch with the Special Needs Guidance Group and get your family on that wait list. And before I turn it back over to Dr. Hans to wrap us up, I wanted to share something that we all find is really important for families of children with exceptional needs, and that's the importance of building a support system. That's one of my biggest platforms, and actually I have a book coming out later this month called It Takes a Village, How to Build a Support System for Your Exceptional Needs Family. That's coming out with AAPC Publishing, but you can also find it on my website at www.bigabilities.com. But I want to give you 3 takeaways from that book, and actually from this session, I think. So the first one is that it's important to have friends within the special needs community. If you're new on this journey, as I was in the beginning, I knew no one that had a child with autism. And I felt isolated and overwhelmed and confused and scared and all the things. And it was when I started building friendships with other people that had children like my son that I felt like, you know what? This is normal. It's just a new normal. And I had friends to lean on and friends to lean on me. And I just think about how good it feels right now to be in this room and know that even though all of our stories are different, one thing ties us all together, and that we get it, right? We have a child with exceptional needs. So if you don't have friends within the special needs community, join Facebook groups, reach out to people at your child's center. Just the other day, I picked my son up, and he was hugging goodbye to one of his friends, and the mom walked up, and I said, "Oh, I'm Barkley's mom." She's like, "I'm Noah's mom," and so we exchanged numbers, and so we're going to get those kids together for a play date, which is great because, having play dates with other children is sometimes challenging for my son. So it's really important for your mental health to reach out to people and build a support system within the special needs community. And the second, and we've talked about this a lot, is your professional support system, the doctors, medical providers, teachers, every person on that team, as Dr. Hans said multiple times, needs to treat you as you are the expert on your child. And if they don't, then it may be time to look for a different provider. So, and it's not always that too. Sometimes maybe just your child isn't pairing well with that therapist, or that therapist style just doesn't work with your child, and it may be time to look for someone else. I didn't realize that was even an option early on. My son's first diagnosis was a communication disorder, so the pediatrician referred him to a speech therapist whose motivation or her way of therapy with him was to strap him in a chair and dangle flashcards in front of him. That didn't work for him. But I went there week after week and put him through torture, and me like, what am I doing? And then finally I realized, do I really have to? There's more than one speech therapist. Do I need to take him here? And it wasn't that was just the way she ran her therapy. And so we went somewhere else, and he did great. So just make sure every person that on your professional support system is bringing what you need them to bring to your child's team, and they're treating you like the expert. And then lastly, and this is oftentimes the hardest thing to do, and that's educating your family. Because I remember when my son was first diagnosed with autism, my father told me, I'm not going to agree to that. I'm not going to accept that diagnosis. I'm going to be optimistic. And I heard that, and I have to accept that diagnosis. I've had, developmental pediatricians and psychologists and all these professionals tell me your child has autism, and these are the services he needs. And I'm trying to navigate through that process with my dad telling me that he's not going to accept it because he's optimistic, and I hear, because I'm accepting it, I'm pessimistic. And that was really hard, and I worked for a very long time to educate him. I would send him articles. I would invite him to therapy appointments. I would ask, can my dad, come in on this call with us with, speech therapist? And it took a while, but eventually he accepted everything as I needed him to accept it. And I was just telling my daughter on the way here, he now sends me articles that he reads online. So, educating your family, and I know Dr. Hans deals with this a lot. A lot of times it's the grandparents that really struggle to accept that diagnosis. We can talk to them for you. They can, come to therapy appointments. And, once you've done the work, if they still aren't accepting it, the ball's in their court. But educating your family is a really important part of this journey. So I am going to pass it over to Dr. Hans to wrap things up.
Thanks, Amy. I'm just going to add a little bit on that, building your kind of support system. With that, I'm going to go back to our educational and our school-based services. When you're sitting in that meeting as the parent, you're often sat at a table with 10 to 11 other professionals all talking at you about your child and what they see and what they think they need to do and all of this. It's very overwhelming to take all of that information in. It's really good to have someone on your side, a parent advocate, an advocate to sit with you, to help you digest that information, to explain things that don't make sense. And again, like Amy said, you're the expert on your child. That's something we truly believe. So just know that you have your child's best interest at heart. Speak up and advocate for them. And again, from the provider perspective, we want your child to be successful. Most of us are providers because in this world, in the disabilities community, what gets us out of bed every day, it's clearly, typically not the parents, sorry guys, it's the kids. We like to see them and we like to see their progress. We're just as excited as you are when they master a new skill or they eat a new food. They are able to do something for the first time, like feed themselves, zip their pants, they're toilet trained. We're just as excited as you guys are. That's what we get excited about. We're on this journey with you. And with that, though, like Amy said, every provider is not the provider for you. For us, we look at, a philosophy we kind of come from is what's developmentally appropriate. We wouldn't put a 3-year-old in a chair and have them do flashcards, because that's not what 3-year-olds do. They run around and play. We're going to follow them around and play with them and talk about all the things in their environment. But you have to find that philosophy that matches yours. And it's okay. I know it's really hard because, like Amy said, you're kind of, okay, this person knows what my child needs and I'm giving it my best shot and this just doesn't feel right. But providers know that they're not going to be the right fit for everyone. So don't feel guilty or any of those feelings. If you're like, this is not for me, you can just let them know, at this time we just don't think this service is for us anymore. We've decided to go another way and change providers. It's okay to do that. And I just like to give parents some grace with that, because I know it's really hard when you're working with these people on a weekly basis. You're seeing them over and over, and then you're thinking, we're not making the progress I thought we would, or this is too intrusive on my family, or whatever's happening, it might be too costly. It's okay, and providers understand that. You have to keep your family at the center. All the goals that we're working towards is to make your quality of life better, to make your child progress, and to make them independent. We have a little bit of time at the end, so we just kind of wanted to introduce. We have Blair Harder here, if you want to wave, Blair. She's our speech and feeding therapist at the clinic, and Jessica Barisano, our founder and educational advocate. And we have Abida Kamal, who's one of our behavior analysts, and one of our panelists as well. We're happy to take some questions because we do have a little bit of time, and I think that Amy and I just have a few closing remarks for you. So I did kind of say it, but you're the expert on your child. We are in this as a team, and our whole goal is to make your child as successful as possible.
So any questions? Yes.
So you guys help find providers for like clients here. Is it just in your area or is it across the state?
Across the state.
Okay, so the question was, do we help families find providers just in our area across the state? And we do help families across the state find providers. So yeah, you can reach out to us, www.collaborativecorner.org, and the panelists are at the top. And send us an email. We'll see what we can do to help. Any other questions? I'll let you take this one, Karen.
Yeah.
I have a comment /
Sure.
I teach in Taylor County, North Florida, and I really like what you said about the parents being the advocate for the child. I'm an educator, and I just would like to say that, you know, I advocate for my students, and sometimes that gets me in trouble. I'm not always the favorite at the IEP meeting, and parents have to advocate. And another thing that to remember is that IEP is not set in stone when you walk out that door.
Absolutely.
Always know that if that teacher is not, just like with that doctor or that therapist, you can always go back and say, you know, this is not working for me. You know, because sometimes teachers aren't as educated as we would like for them to be about autism and other disabilities, and because unfortunately the state has not got all of the best educated teachers when it comes to disabilities, and so they're throwing teachers in there that aren't prepared to teach those needs. And so I'm just seeing that we've got some teachers teaching students with special needs that aren't qualified, and therefore it's okay to say, whoa, you know, we're going to need to rethink this. We're going to need to come back to the table and look at this IEP. We're going to need to look at this educational situation again. And I think that that's one thing that parents need to know. They need to know that it's okay to come back to that IEP and say, this is not, because a lot of parents think that once they walk away from it, they're stuck with that for a year, but that's not the case.
That's an excellent point. And we've just been kind of asked to restate the questions or the comment because they are recording this. So I'm just going to kind of restate what you said, if that's okay. So she brought up an excellent point that IEPs, once they're written, individualized education plans, it's where there's specific educational goals your child is working on. They're typically termed for a year and broken down into shorter term goals, but they're not set in stone. So you don't have to wait a whole year to revisit that plan if you don't feel like that plan is working, or if you've decided, you know what, they've offered me this service, we've tried it, and it's not working for my child within the school system, or they did offer me this service and I wasn't sure about it, and now I'd like to add it. So that was a very excellent point. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And I saw one more hand, I think.
Yes.
Just our son was just diagnosed with ASD the other day, so we're really like fell down the rabbit hole of Facebook and trying to like do all the groups and everything. So like what is ABA
Sure, I'll give a quick little response from the parent's perspective, and then I'll pass it over to Dr. Hans as the provider. So he asked, their son just got diagnosed with ASD, and what is ABA therapy, applied behavior analysis? And I'm not going to go into what it is. I'll let Dr. Hans explain all that, but I just wanted to tell you that, yes, there's sometimes some controversy surrounding that term. My son's been in ABA for 3.5 years, and I honestly will cry when he doesn't need it anymore. It has transformed our family's life, and you know, his therapist he calls her his best friend. He loves going, but what they really do is they hone in on the individual skills that your child is struggling with, and they use things like positive reinforcement to help build those skills. So when my son started, he had lost all ability to speak. He had been verbal, but then regressed, and that's a common characteristic in ASD, is either not reaching a developmental milestone or a regression in a previously learned milestone. And speech therapy was slow. And once he started ABA, one of the things they do is manned training, and so we gave up speech, and the speech therapist, if he would say he would want juice, and typically he would walk me to the fridge. So, and what he would then do is they would require him to at least, articulate something like, try to say something. And then after he could do that, it was getting the word out, juice, and then requiring him to go, juice please, and just kind of slowly building. And it's all positive reinforcement based, so they're going to use what motivates your child. Like, ABA therapists are the most fun people on planet Earth, because they want what you want them to do as the therapist to be more fun than what the child wants to do if they don't want to, work on that skill. But every day when I drop my son off, he is happy to walk in. Every day when I pick him up, he is happy to, at the end of the day. And I've learned so many of those strategies from the providers that I now, use most ABA strategies in my home. So now I'm going to let you get to the meat of it with Dr. Hans.
Absolutely, and I'm kind of glad you asked this question. It is a hot button topic, and the reason why, there's a reason that people practice medicine, because it's not cut and dry, and there are things that have been done in the past that weren't exactly on the up and up in psychology, and ABA is a part of that. And so it does have a little bit of a sad history with that. What ABA therapy should be looking like, and again, this is why we encourage you to interview your providers, is if your child is 2, I think you said, it should look a lot like play. We should be working on helping them communicate, and again, we're looking at independence. So at 2 years old, your child's probably not going to wash themselves or go to the toilet. They're not expected to do any of those things, but it would be communication, and if they have any behaviors that are impeding them or injuring themselves. So if, for instance, we work with kids who might bang their head or bite themselves or stuff like that, we're going to try to find something else that meets that need. So we have a kiddo that I work with right now that he bites himself, and we offer him something to chew on every 10 to 15 minutes, and then he doesn't bite himself anymore, and that's a lot more appropriate for him, because we don't want him harming himself and tearing his skin. So it's things like that that we work on. So we look on what's that behavior doing for them, how can we meet that in a safer way, and then trying to increase those skills to get them as independent as possible. And again, like Amy said, it should be like a really good developmental match. It should be through play-based therapy. And the other hot button topic, since you asked about it, a lot of times what ABA gets a bad rap for is depressing stereotypy in children with autism. So if the kid rocks, they're saying ABA therapists won't let them do that. They shouldn't be blocking that stereotypy unless, again, it's dangerous or it's impeding them in some way. That's just part of who they are. Everyone that works with me knows I twirl my hair quite a bit. That's my own stereotypy. No one's blocking me from doing that. People click their pen up and down. People jiggle their leg. We all do it. We just do it in a little bit more subtle way. That's okay. But that's just to kind of address why it's hot button. There's some things. Any other questions? Well, we thank you guys for coming. And if you do have questions, we're up here, and feel free to come and chat with us. Thank you so much.